During the first COVID lockdown, my wife and I decided to deregister our son from school. We'd considered it previously, but lockdown provided the perfect opportunity. Although he had enjoyed nursery and reception, it was noticeably clear that Year 1 was more challenging for him and many of the children in his class. Personally, one of my main concerns was that he would feel isolated and struggle to make friends in a home education setting. Thankfully, within a few months, these fears had dissipated completely. Within our local community, we've connected with many other home educating parents and children, all at different stages of experience and understanding on this journey. Talking with these parents has helped further my own understanding of what education, learning, and socialising truly means. I was guilty also of having the misconception that maybe home educated children would lack social skills from not attending school. The opposite is actually true. My child has gone from being quite a nervous person in social situations to becoming so confident not just in talking to and befriending children of his own age, but also with children from all ages. My child is 9 and his friendship group is from 3 to 15 and he communicates with all of those children regularly. This has also given him the ability to talk confidently and at length with adults, which puts him in great stead for social interactions in later life. So actually, when we see it from that perspective, school is not a normal social situation. It's an enforced social situation where the social elements of it are restricted and only had during short breaks. It's also unusual to befriend kids from a different school year to you. So if you find the right community, of which there are many scattered throughout the UK, you can integrate your family into one of these communities and really make it your home and social hub. My family has made so many connections and close friendships since deciding to home educate. These children will be friends for life, no different to friends made at school. Seeing them play together in freedom is a truly wonderful sight. Socialising has actually become our area of least concern. Talking to members of this community, ex-teachers, parents who have home educated 7 children, home educated children who have become home educating parents, mothers who've battled for the right of their child to receive the education their needs require, and so many more, I realised how each story reinforced our belief that we had definitely made the right decision for our son. I'd love for this film to inspire others to embark on this journey with their families, for them to witness firsthand how transformative home education can be for some children.
So our community here began out of necessity, really, right after lockdown and COVID and things were opening back up. And at the time, transport, I think, was still not an option for us. So it became a necessity to find a community that was very local. We were so thankful for the broader community in all of London, but it became very clear that we needed people that could walk to gather at the park, for example. And so we started with a couple of families. I just put the word out, and a couple of families locally were like, yeah, we can meet at the park. And pretty soon word of mouth spread and people came out of the woodwork, and whether it was that they were longtime home educators and found this community, or perhaps throughout COVID, they realized, like, actually, this is a really great way of doing education. They learned about their child during that time when they were homeschooling and decided to make it a permanent thing. And word has spread and community has grown. When you're around the same people week after week, there are just great friendships that are built between children of all different ages, the younger with the older with the younger, and between parents as well, which has been an amazing source of encouragement and just inspiration as we all kind of walk this journey in our separate ways, but kind of together collectively as well.
Meeting Amy and Alfie on this journey has been enlightening. Having both been home educated from the start with no previous experience of traditional school, they are now parents home educating their own children.
Well, my brother did go to school, and he's a lot older than me. He's 14 years older. So by the time I was born, he'd already been through primary, secondary, and she'd seen how much he didn't enjoy it, probably what was lacking in the system. And also I think there was general just sort of, she had him quite young, so she probably wasn't aware of an alternative. By the time I was born, she was. And I think she did go and look at nurseries, and she just said, it was the vibe, it was just like an instinct thing. She went in, there was like 30 kids, 2 teachers, and she was like, how can this be right way to raise a child? So I never went to school, so I was home educated, never went to nursery, never went to primary, secondary, but my mum got involved in the home ed community quite young, so I started going to the group I went to when I was 3, I think, and there was lots of other people the same age, but it sort of ranged right from 2 up until, I'd say, early to late teens. And I'm from Hampstead originally, so North London, and the group we went to was called the Otherwise Club in North West London, so very local. And this would have been in the early 90s. Yeah, that's just kind of, that was my whole existence. I never went to school, although I did have friends that went to school.
I also never went to school, so I was brought up in South East London, so around Greenwich kind of borough area. And I had an older sister and a younger brother, so we were all sort of 3 years apart, and we were all home educated by a single mum. And similar to Amy, my sister actually was kind of in and out of school and tried school a little bit. It was always our choice, so my mum always said from any age, you can choose if you want to go, and she did choose to go kind of now and again. We just didn't, my brother and I, we just really enjoyed being home educated. We travelled around a lot for groups, but we didn't have a car. We used to get lots and lots of buses to different places, lots of long bus journeys. I think again it was kind of word of mouth and through sort of knowing different people was how it all came about. And actually as we got older we used to travel more across to sort of the North London groups. That's actually how we met when we were quite young. And I guess my mum's rationale for it was that she had quite a tough time when she was younger at school. So she just had a bit of a tough time with education. She got into a grammar school when she was younger, and that was an even bigger deal than it is now kind of back then. And then various things happened in her family which meant that she wasn't able to go to that school. Ended up in a kind of girls' state school that was quite rough, and just didn't enjoy it, didn't feel like she came away with what she wanted. It became so much more about the other kids and the environment than about her education. And so she wanted us to just have a different choice. And I think quite often when you grow up in an area where the schools aren't great, you feel like you've got one choice, and it's to find the best of the bad schools. And actually, even though we lived in an area that wasn't particularly affluent or anything like that, and mum was on benefits, actually she wanted to give us an option to have a different style of education.
Within our community, there are numerous ex-teachers. Qualified to teach in the traditional school setting, we asked why they had decided to home educate their own children.
I don't think I initially considered home education as an option. I was not home educated, and but as I started to learn more about it, it became that education that I wish I could have provided in the classroom that I couldn't. And so really the biggest thing I think about home education, biggest difference with regards to schooling, is that we get to tailor make our education for each child. And I may have 5 children, but that's a whole lot less than I had in the classroom, and I get to see those children through every single year, instead of a child having to basically, and a teacher reinventing the wheel and having to get to know that child in a very short amount of time, and then going on to the next year and having to do the same. And there are some amazing teachers out there who take great interest in that child, but the reality is that they only get 1 year with that child. What I learned through that was the consistent relationship is the family, is the parents. And so after having my own children, and we began to discern about schooling, home education wasn't really even on my radar at the point. But when I started to think about how do I want it different for my child? How can I have this sort of consistent relationship going? How can my child's interests and talents and just natural passions and things like this, how can they be developed if there's this sort of kind of disruptive pattern? And that's when we really fell into some other homeschooling families in our area in the U.S. We came alongside them, and I was able to ask lots of questions and really get a lot of the stereotypes or myths that had kind of surrounded homeschooling or home education. I got the questions answered, and we went for it. And the first, I would say that our eldest was probably 4 or 5 at the time, and because school was the only thing I knew, it looked very much like school when we started home educating our eldest daughter. And that very quickly, it was very obvious that wasn't going to work. It was dull and boring, and I realized that being a teacher and being a parent at the same time, this is a different scenario for me than in the classroom, where you just sit down, do what you're told, kids, and like, this is the way that we're going to do it.
So I trained to be a primary school teacher in Australia in the 90s, and it was very much, it's the process and not the product that's important, and it was a much more sort of holistic look at education and integrating all the subjects together. And then when I moved to the UK in 2000, I found a very different approach to education. It was very much what looked to me like tick box exercises. There wasn't enough time for consolidation of most things. And then I did a lot of supply teaching over the years in the UK, and I just didn't want my kids in that sort of system. I wanted to have a different approach and to be able to spend more time with them. I would often work in after school clubs and see the kids just exhausted and stressed from their day, and parents saying, "Oh, I can't bring my child to dance classes today because they've got too much homework," and this is primary school age kids. And I just didn't want that sort of lifestyle for my children. What do we do the most of, kids?
Dancing. Maths.
Maths? I think you do a lot more gymnastics than you do maths.
Yeah.
We do a lot of maths. We do a lot of gymnastics, singing, dancing, pottery.
Yeah.
Piano, French. Swimming.
Atco.
We get to see our family all the time,
And we can also
and we
learn,
don't get an attention.
and we also learn new things. The name's basically self-explanatory. You get to be home, and you get to be educated.
And there's 30 children to teach in the class. In homeschool, there's only you and maybe a few siblings. In school, there are like 30 children. You also have loads and loads and loads more breaks when you're in homeschool. In school, you barely have any breaks.
Before we removed our son from school, the last parents' evening we had, we were told he was below average in a few areas. As a late summer-born child who was in some cases almost a whole year younger than his peers, we were not that surprised, but then we knew his strengths and were baffled when told he was behind in reading. During the lockdown, when we watched him read a book with over 400 pages in less than 5 days, we started to question whether school was an environment we were happy to judge his development anymore. And what do those averages they speak of actually translate to in a real-world scenario? We started to wonder what his life and education could look like in a relaxed and comfortable setting, how at home he was able to show us his capabilities without constant assessment or categorising. Maybe school wasn't suitable for him and there were other options. Perhaps he was slightly behind in the averages that are set by education bodies, but what does that actually mean for individual children and their potentials? As a mother, I feel that I know my son better than anyone. I understand his needs, his interests, passions and motivations. His growth and emotional well-being are fundamental at home and now within the home as a setting for home ed. We're not testing him against a metric system, so we're able to see that while there's lots to learn and understand educationally, it's more beneficial to cultivate the love of learning without the constraints of such a system. Therefore, we can supply learning materials tailored to his interests and he can go at his own pace with one-on-one supervision and encouragement. There's no more being told you're behind or below average. As adults and parents, we still learn every day. Just being in the world, we acquire knowledge. Life is an education. Can I teach like a school teacher who learned how to do so in a university? No, but I believe teaching is much more than just academics. It's a holistic process. Children, when left with time to think, to discover subjects they're personally interested in, to be bored, to have imaginative play, to listen to their own minds without constant chatter, have more opportunity to discover their many talents and potentials. I'm no longer questioning my capability as a parent to educate my son. I'm witnessing that giving him the space to breathe has meant he and our home ed journey is educating us all, showing us what a world without institutionalised limitations looks like and means for well-rounded, emotionally grounded children, and with that inviting a broader perspective on life itself.
I left school when I was 5. Since then, it's been a fun ride. I love home ed because I have the freedom and time to learn about and follow the things I want to do. For example, I love history, so I'm able to go to places like the British Museum and Hampton Court Palace during the school week when it isn't too crowded. I've got the time to do what I love doing, like making stories and comics and being creative. I'm learning how to research about things I'm interested in, and I'm discovering new things all the time.
Many parents have asked themselves the question of whether they are qualified to teach their own child at home. Since my daughter was born 7 years ago, I've had many conversations with other parents who, having begun to doubt the suitability of the school environment for their child for many different reasons, have considered home educating. This is always the first and quite often the last question they ask themselves. In my experience, it's been the defining reason behind these parents deciding to stick with the tried and tested method of schooling rather than risk making mistakes they fear could damage their child's future. They believe they do not have what it takes to accept the burden of their child's education. For me, it's a question rooted in fear, and one that I'm sure every home educating parent has grappled with and in one way or another overcome. I know I did. It took several years of asking myself this question before I was able to approach it without fear. If I hadn't started asking myself this question 3 years before my daughter would reach compulsory school age, I might also have struggled to overcome it. For me, this question comes down to understanding what you expect to achieve in keeping your child out of the school environment. It's a question that highlights the difference between the idea of home educating and homeschooling. If you genuinely want your child to be schooled, then they should go to school. That's the only place that schooling truly exists. There are many different forms of schooling, but they all happen within a standardized school environment. One thing that's almost impossible to achieve, as experienced by many parents who were expected to replicate the school environment at home during COVID lockdowns, is to effectively recreate school in the home. School is designed to cater for many children, not just one or two. Schools are required to teach a syllabus set by the governing body. not to identify and encourage particular areas of individual interest. Schools are tasked with delivering discipline that can sometimes be entirely out of keeping with the values and behavioural expectations at home. School and home couldn't be more different, and in that respect, the idea of homeschooling to me is an oxymoron. I think all these questions concerning teaching should be replaced by just one essential question: what is my role as a parent? By choosing educating over schooling, I know that my role is not to teach, but rather to facilitate the act of learning. In fact, before I even started home educating, I had been filling this role for several years already. When my daughter started learning to walk, I was there to encourage and support her through each step. When she started learning to talk, I was on hand to converse with her and help her understand the power of communication. Likewise, when she learned to eat solid foods, make friends, regulate her emotions, I was there alongside her, not teaching but facilitating her learning and offering support whenever it was needed. I haven't stopped doing that, and now she's 7 years old and there are new things for her to learn, new experiences for her to have, and new questions for her to ask. And yes, I'm still there, just as I was before, facilitating and supporting her development in every area of her life. As far as I'm concerned, this is my role as a parent, and it does not end once they reach compulsory school age. It just evolves. In the UK, when our children turn 5, the expectation is for us as parents to suddenly and willingly hand the bulk of responsibility for their social, emotional and intellectual development over to schools. The parenting skills we've developed over the past 5 years or more, not to mention the bond we have built with our child that allows them to learn and fail in the safest of all environments, is cast aside for 6 hours a day, 5 days a week, 39 weeks a year. For my wife and I, home educating has always been an extension of the role we've been fulfilling since our daughter's birth. She learned to walk because she wanted to get from one place to another more quickly. She learned to talk because she wanted to more effectively communicate with the people around her. She learned everything she knows without a curriculum, on her own terms. For us, education should be handled the same way as all these other important developmental milestones in her life.
Being educated in a school I haven't experienced, but I knew it would be a life that wouldn't be fun and gay.
I like how I get to learn what I want to learn. Well, I really like comics, so I'm learning about how to make comics and about understanding comics.
What I enjoy about home education is that I get to be free and I get to play with my friends often, especially these two, because these are my bestest friends in the whole wide world, and if I didn't leave school, then I wouldn't have gotten these friends. Hey.
There is probably a perception that money comes into a choice around home education, because of course you've got to have money to pay the rent, money to look after your kids, and for a lot of people they think that you have to fund a tutor or some kind of external education. But actually my mum was a single mum bringing up 3 children in London, and she home educated, and actually a lot of the parents that we spent time with, a lot of the kids that we spent time with were single parents as well. And so I think it's just, thinking a bit more creatively around what you need to do. You know, for parents to work in London quite often, you will earn just enough to get by, if that, on top of childcare and everything else. And actually, through being on benefits, I guess you could say that gave my mum an extra option to do it. But actually, she just wanted to invest all of her time in it. So I think the most important thing is if you're a parent who really is keen to invest that much time. Not everybody's up for spending that much time with their kids, investing that much time in educating them. It's not for everyone. But actually, if you're a parent that thinks you might want to do that, then I think there's lots and lots of different ways you can do it. There's lots and lots of different options. And so I think whilst it makes it easier if you've got money, I would say the vast majority of people we grew up with homeschooled were not from money. And tutors, I never had a tutor. My mum literally did everything with books from W.H. Smith's, books from different retailers. It got you to the right key stage of whatever topic you were studying, but actually it was never about paying for anything additional. We lived quite modestly still.
Yeah, my mum worked on and off throughout my childhood, but in sort of cleaning jobs and stuff like that. And sometimes I'd just come with her, and I'd bring a book, or I'd bring some homework or something like that to do, or I'd stay at a friend's house, and she sort of got along by doing it that way. And also in terms of, we did go to a group, and I think you had to pay sort of like a yearly fee, but it was minimal, like £100 a year to help with hiring the space. But that meant that we all had lessons together, and we went on group activities, and I think there's also that sort of expectation that if you're homeschooling, you're very much doing it solo. There is no room for that sort of social connection and learning together, when actually it's the complete opposite.
And that's the other thing, the community is a huge part of it. People do look after each other, and so when we were going to big festivals and stuff like that, actually we didn't have a car, so we'd go on the train, but we'd have people who would take tents for us. They take stuff, carry it. They take one of the kids because it was easier to get there in their car. They cook meals together. You'd hand bits of furniture, clothing between each other. There were so many things that people would do to support each other that actually, of course, there's rent and all those things that come into it. But aside from that, it's a real community.
Yeah.
Not all parents within the home education community have objections to modern schooling methods. Some have withdrawn their children due to bullying, and many within the community have children that would likely be in school, but for special educational needs that from their experience most schools were not able to cope with. We spoke to Cora, mother of Dara.
His needs are more complex than just saying he's got autism, or he has a communication disorder, or he has behavioral issues, or he has ADHD. And so his needs, I didn't feel, living in central London, there was any school out there that would be right for him without creating anxiety. I love school. So I think a lot of people forget that people that home educate, we might think, oh, all home educators dislike school themselves. But I loved school. Dara was in a private nursery. He'd gone to do different private nurseries, and then at that point, we didn't really feel like we could find a school that he was right for. We just thought developmentally he just needed another year, and so we found a place that would take him to do his nursery year for a third year. And basically that place didn't have a proper SEND provision. He went to all these places with a one-to-one shadow helping him, but they just basically felt he was disruptive and difficult, and basically said, you should go off to this special needs school, which wasn't actually, which we went to look at, it would have been absolutely a disastrous special needs school for my son, because they didn't, first of all, they didn't take kids as young as 3. A lot of special needs school only start at 7. And so what do you do between when you're 4.5 and you need to go to a school between 4.5 and 7, that pre-prep provision in special needs? And actually it was thanks to another mother that I met socially, and she home educated her son, or both her kids. Her son at the time was 13 or 14, and he was touring, being a pop musician too, and she decided to home educate just for the fact that she loved educating and loved teaching herself. And so she, with a bunch of friends, decided to start home educating their kids when she lived back in New England. And she kind of gave me a few books by the man called Holt, who was kind of the father of home education and unschooling and all of these things. And she sent me 3 books, and I kind of realized, I wasn't the only person that, could consider this, and it wasn't bad. And even though the speech and language therapist at the time said, you need to be social, but you read all these things about how kids, progressed, that developmentally all these kids progress, and then age 5 or 6, they stop progressing. But they basically have a cliff fall, and they stopped progressing. So that was really important to do early intervention until 5 and 6, and then progress for some kids stood still. And I have a firm belief that actually the reason certain kids have this stop of progress is because they end up putting in a school environment that produces so much anxiety
that they slowly fold in on themselves and basically shut off from the world and then stop learning. At the time when we just started home educating, I still wasn't sure if this was the long-term best thing for my son, and I applied for an educational healthcare plan. It's basically when your local authority acknowledges that your child has special needs. Generally, this is something that generally is requested by a school. When a school realizes a child has special needs, they then suggest this to them, and you go to the local authority. As I was in private schools and then we were home educating, I just decided to start this process on my own. And basically the problem is local authorities do not have enough money to provide the full provision that would be ideal for a child. So generally, they suggest things that are below what they should need, and only when you really failed you get what you want. I mean, every local authority is different. Some are worse than others. But, they suggested that my child gets a one-to-one in a mainstream school, but a one-to-one in a class. So a mainstream class is 30 kids, and that should be the max in this classroom built. But in every class, there are also 2 special needs kids, plus 2 assistants for those kids. So every classroom that should only have 30 kids and 1 teacher has 4 extra people in those rooms. And for a son whose child has ADHD, who gets distracted by noise, who has issues processing, hearing things, attention, focusing, remembering things. I mean, all these things are so challenging that in a classroom where something is said once, then it goes on, the next thing's gone, there's so much anxiety that's created. So home education gave us the freedom to build learning around his needs. And as I like learning, I wasn't scared of the fact that I could do it or couldn't do it. I have 2 older kids who all went through school and boarding school and are both at university now. One's studying business and one's an artist, so totally different people. Although what we do might look more like home schooling, it's really about home education. And so much time in a school environment is, of course, spent herding kids to one place, making sure everybody's focused, giving everybody a turn. So reality is when you're at home, you can do that education in 2 hours, what another 5-year-old would do over 6 hours.
Well, with my eldest child, through the COVID, she got her average marks, she wasn't allowed to do her exams because of the COVID, and that just made her hugely depressed. And then I started looking back at things like she was best at trumpet in her school. She was very confident. She used to be very confident when she was a kid, and she knew she wanted to be a writer, and nobody ever sort of, hey, good, you know what you want to do, let's push you forward. And I realized, actually, I don't think the school has done much good. And well, not like much good. I can't say it hasn't done anything good at all, that's for sure, I can't say that. But, and there were some bullying experiences that school had to sort of deal with, and they never dealt with it properly. And I thought, that's all just summed up, and I thought, I'm not sure that was a good decision for her. And she still hasn't recovered from school, I must say. She's 19 and she hasn't continued after her GCSEs. Obviously everything changes, so I think that will pass and that will change. I hope she will figure out. But she is quite depressed, and I think she's not, the school system hasn't done the job they were supposed to do in her case. So I'm definitely not going to try the same thing with my second child.
Mama, can we get ice cream?
So I'm the aunt of a Japanese guy, but it sounded like a bit of a crazy artist because she had a strange vision that was she saw everything as dots, and then ever since then she loved dots. She was obsessed with dots, and I don't think school would have been doing that today.
And socially, they were not lacking in the slightest. Like, we had such a good social mix. There were so many groups to go to, and also when we were growing up, there was a festival that was every year called HESFest, which was Home Educators Seaside Festival, which was a big opportunity for networking. Basically, home educators from all over the country came, and then you kept in touch with those people. I mean, in terms of comparison, a lot of my friends were home educated, so I didn't have that much direct comparison with what it was like different from the school system. The only thing I'd say is, when I went to university, is I'd experienced a lot from a younger age than, say, my peers who had gone to school had. They were going out later from a younger age and doing all of that a bit younger. But it's a positive in the fact that when I got to university, I was like, oh, I don't want to do that anymore. I just kind of want to study. And everyone else was like, oh my God, freedom for the first time ever. And they were just like drinking and just going insane because they'd never had a sense of authority or autonomy of their own.
It sort of accelerates teenagehood in a way, so I definitely felt like I was maturer, younger, and not in a negative way, you know, not that I was doing stuff that I shouldn't have been doing from a young age, but that actually, to Amy's point, it felt like we got given the freedom, which meant we weren't as, I guess, wild with it later on. You know, home education is one of those things that transcends class, it transcends location, there's lots and lots of sort of different things that come together. So from when we were young teenagers, we were travelling to Sheffield, to Manchester, to see different friends around the country. And so actually that level of autonomy that you get is just very different. And so I felt so much more mature as a result, I think. And socially it was great because we just met so many different types of people. You know, we didn't lose the local friends. I still had lots of friends who went to school, who lived near me, who I went to hang out with. But actually I had this whole other group of people that I knew that were in a different kind of place. And it also meant that we were much more adaptable. Because actually the local kids in the areas we lived in, I would go out probably dressing a slightly different way. I'd be in tracksuits and I'd be playing football, and then actually with home educated kids I'd be playing music or skateboarding or doing something. So you kind of got to try lots of different things. I think we probably both feel quite able to adapt because of that, because we just met a wider group of people than we probably would have if we were put into a school with people from a particular area, a particular background.
For me, the best thing about home education is getting to choose the skills, topics, and activities that I'm most interested in and spending most of my time focusing on those things. Currently, I'm really into photography and learning more about the travel and tourism industry, so I've gotten to take various courses based on those topics. Because we're often in a multi-age environment, I get to interact with both adults and children of all ages, which I think is pretty cool because I get to play and hang out with the younger kids while also getting to have interesting conversations with the adults. I've learned that friendship can be much broader than just with people my own age. I feel like home education has also allowed me to have a really unique relationship with my siblings and parents. Like every family, there are times that we don't get along, but I would say that my siblings are my closest friends. I've definitely had to grow in self-discipline as I've learned that I'm actually responsible for my own learning and have to set my own deadlines and manage my time wisely. I have the flexibility to create my own schedule. I am able to make a little money cleaning each week, which is not the most glamorous job, but it's taught me how to work hard and to communicate well with the people I work with. I think if I was to describe home education in one word, I would probably say adventure. It has its ups and downs, but every year has brought different experiences, new challenges, and overall, it's been a really great experience.
I sort of just chose to do GCSEs without even thinking, oh, it's because I want them to do A-levels or university. It was just that I thought I'd try this in isolation and to see what it's like. And I went to a sixth form in London. I only did Spanish, photography, fine art, and English literature. So I did 4 GCSEs, no maths, no science. and it's not actually ever hindered me once in my life. I did go into a very sort of arts-based career, so obviously I knew I wanted to do that, but getting into the sixth form wasn't an issue. I loved being there. It wasn't a shock to the system at all. I enjoyed the social side. The studying was absolutely fine. I was sort of top of the class, even though I'd come from this home ed background.
Yeah, mine was a real mix actually. So my mum, we did focus a bit more on maths and English in our education. And I went when I was about 14 or 15 to an adult education college to do a maths GCSE, to just try out what's it like to be in a classroom, to be in that environment. So it was fine. I got the GCSE and I went through it, but it actually helped me learn a lot about what did I want to do and how did I want to do it kind of from there on. So I went a bit of a mixed route. I kind of went into doing a BTEC to start with in technology, and that was because I liked tech and IT. I thought that's something I should learn about, and did the BTEC in IT. That went really well, but I realised IT wasn't for me, and that maybe wasn't, again, the social side that I wanted. And then when I did A-levels after that, I did law, business and sociology, and I actually went and did a degree in law afterwards. Literally didn't apply to university until about a week before the deadline, but then from there I went on to study law at University of Queen Mary, and that was the end of it really. But I think the important thing for us, or for me, was that after the first year or two, it was always about studying subjects that I enjoyed studying.
So as we've heard, for those who value higher education and qualifications, being home educated does not prevent you from achieving GCSEs, A-levels, degrees, or accessing any other aspect of education or life. The fact is, home educated children have plenty more time, space and freedom to find and explore their interests. From my own experience at school, I learnt many things that have not been of use in my life whatsoever. I also have a degree that has no relevance to the work I do now, and in fact I have no qualifications in any of the areas that I currently make a living in. The most important realisation is that when home educating, you have the sovereignty and flexibility to tailor your children's education to one that's most suitable for their needs during these precious years of early life. In the UK, deregistering your child from school is still an easy process. It's also important to remember that school is an opt-in procedure. If you never register them, they do not have to go. There's no legal requirement to at the moment. In conclusion, every child is different. And whilst it's clear some children are well adapted to the school environment, there is also an increasing number who aren't. They may not be suited to the methods of learning used at school. There may be issues with bullying or have complex needs that some schools are not able to cater for adequately. What we do have in common as parents is that we all want the very best for our children and to see them grow up to become happy and balanced adults. But that is much less likely to happen if their childhoods are full of anxiety. This journey has made me understand how much I still have to learn and unlearn. But our child is much happier now than he ever was in a school environment, flourishing with new experiences, friendships, connections, and most importantly, freedom.